landscaping and how to have a beautiful yard. Doug Ashenhurst is going to get started.
So Daybreak has asked us just to go over some practices for your lawn at your home. Some of the methods that we use to take care of large commercial properties, we're just going to share with you some different tips and ideas that you can use it in your own home and landscape maintenance. Can they hear me? I'll put it up higher. Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Still no?
No, it's your turn. No, you got to talk into it.
Okay, I'll hold it. Okay, so we're going to go over, you can see our list. We have a couple of different experts from our company. Galen with irrigation, Brian, our certified arborist and tree manager, and Lynn is our landscape specialist. He does all of our enhancements through the company and works with all of the shrubs and flowers. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about turf because that's my area of expertise. The idea with your turf is to start out well. A fall fertilizer helps with your weed prevention in the spring. A lot of people don't think about that. If you have a good healthy stand of turf, normally it's pretty easily kept weed free. That best offense is a good defense. Your turf being strong, fertilizer, having them aerated, your lawn aerated, the dead grass can be raked out, and that also helps with getting the water and fertilizer down to the root zone of the turf. And then watering wisely. A lot of people, I've noticed, probably water too much. Turf does not need a ton of water. You want to water as little as possible to make the turf healthy. A green lawn that is dry, like when you walk on it you don't hear sloshing, that's what you're looking for, is a moist soil layer and not overly wet, muddy throughout your lawn. The other thing that can help save your water is to raise the cutting height on your mower. Go from, a lot of people like to mow around 2 inches. If you bump it up to 3 inches, you save water and fertilizer because the roots are sheltered, the grass doesn't grow as fast. Your conservation and lawn will be a lot healthier. Leaving your clippings throughout the year, so mulching instead of bagging, you get some nutrients out of the grass that is left in the lawn. The other thing that we see a lot of, Utah is really common to have necrotic ring spot. And the biggest cause of necrotic ring spot is too much nitrogen in the soil. So over fertilizing your lawn is actually detrimental. Both you have to mow more often, and also your diseases, most diseases that affect turf in Utah thrive on high nitrogen soil. Sorry. Can you hit the next one, Galen?
Excuse me. How often should you leave your clippings?
We're going to do a Q&A as soon as we're done, and we'll answer all the questions you guys have. And then, so if you'll notice, this is more on the weeding. Getting them young when they're small is the best, because if you pull them out, you get the whole plant. Most of the time, if they're a larger weed and you pull it, you leave the roots behind and it just comes back. There's the benefit of a manual removal of your weeds. One is you don't have that chemical in your yard. Some people don't like to use Trimec. It's safe, but there is, people don't like to use it, so you can manually pull them. that I would recommend to keep your yard really healthy, because if you have a healthy stand, you're only going to have a few weeds that get in maybe a small weak spot. There are chemical options. We have a granular pre-emergent, which is a herbicide that only kills the young seedlings. So as the seed sprouts, the herbicide kills that seedling and it prevents the weed from ever being seen. After the weeds have already grown, you need to use a post-emergent, which is 2,4-D, is the most common one that homeowners use. It comes in brands like Ortho Weed Be Gone, or Trimec is the other common broadleaf that you can apply in the grass. It only kills broadleaf weeds. The biggest thing that we see when we get called out and the homeowner can't figure out why his lawn looks all yellow, or he has spots of big patches of yellow, we normally see there was dandelions or something that he was trying to get rid of, and he may have over applied the product. You always want to follow those labels and follow the directions of use on any of your herbicides or any fertilizer, anything that you are applying to your lawn. They've done the studies. The label is the recommended dosage, and it will take care of whatever the problem that you're trying to take care of. Galen is going to talk to us about irrigation and watering wisely.
Thank you, Joe. So we've all heard the expression "slow the flow," and that's important. I like to say "know the flow." And what I mean by that is you have to know your system in order to use it efficiently. And here in Utah, we want to be patient, and what that is referring to is when we first start out in the spring, we still have a lot of moisture in the soil from the recent rain, and it's not quite as hot yet. If you look at turf and shrub needs throughout the season, the watering season, starts out slow, slowly builds up. July, August we peak, and then it starts coming back down. And we want to have our sprinkler systems doing the same thing. We want to start out slow, a couple days a week, and then slowly build it up and ramp it up to July and August when it's at the peak, and then start bringing it back down. And why that is important, and Doug referred to this, is if we start putting water down when the plants still aren't needing them, especially the turf, then the roots aren't looking for extra water. They're not driving down deep. So when you get into that peak heat in July and August, you have shallow root depth, and so it's drying out quickly, and then you have to keep applying more water. So it's really training the roots, in essence, to drive deep and find that water. And it's difficult because at the beginning, we all want green lawns and we want them to look beautiful. That's the goal. But to achieve the ultimate goal of doing that and still using less water, we really have to drive the root depth. And some of that is limited by the type of soil we have. If it's compacted, it's difficult for the roots. And that's why aeration is good, mulching, using the clippings, it retains the moisture deep into the soil so it doesn't evaporate as fast. Initial test and adjustment. When we do our first startup of the season, go through your whole system. Look for anything that's out of adjustment, heads that are leaking. Maybe you nicked it with a snow shovel over the winter. I did a few of those myself. But repair anything at the beginning, because you want that system to be as efficient as possible so that we're not wasting water. Water, we know, is a precious resource. 55% of the usable water that we have is used on irrigation. And as Doug said, they did a study and they found that people overwater anywhere from 30% to 300%. So we're wasting a lot. Start off slow. We want to put down only as much water as the turf needs. And even in the height of summer, turf only uses about a 1/4 inch of water a day. And so if you know a typical spray head puts down about 2 inches of water an hour. And if you did the math there, you'd find you only need 15 minutes of water to replace what was used over the previous day through evaporation and transpiration through the leaf of the plant itself. And if you know that if you, sometimes on slopes or even on flat areas, if the soil's hard and compacted, if you water for 15 minutes, if you stood there and turned your spray zone on and you watch it until it starts running off and running across the sidewalk and into the gutter, it doesn't take 15 minutes. It takes sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes less than that. So a good way to do it, to apply the, get the total amount necessary, is cycle and soak. Do multiple start times a night. Instead of just running through each zone one time and trying to put it all down at once, split it up into 2 start times. Do one in the early evening, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. Do your 7.5 minute run time, go through your zones, and then go back and do it again for the second half. And what that does is that first initial watering, it not only cools the turf and the shrubs, but then it seeps into the ground, makes it nice and moist. And then the second time you run through, that water can really drive down deep, and you won't be running off into the across the sidewalks. And people will call when they see that. Evaluate regularly. It's important, and it's I'm guilty of this myself at my own home. I'll start it up in the springtime, and I'll set my seasonal adjust, and then July comes and I'm thinking, well, it's been running every night, and I haven't gotten up to look at it, and I haven't gone out there on Saturday and gone through all the zones and turned them on and checked. Maybe I clipped one with the lawnmower or the edger, and at 2 a.m. I have a water feature in my front yard that I didn't know about. So it's important, at least, we do our commercial properties weekly because, you pay a lot for water. And on big areas, it really adds up quickly. And even a small leak can really raise that water bill. So residentially, I try to do mine every other week. Go through, first walk around. Is there a spongy spot that, the water may not be coming up out of the ground and running across, but when you step on it, it's suspicious. And that's when you want to look into that farther. And you make those repairs as you see them, and you'll see a big difference. Consider system upgrades and new technology. We don't get a lot of rain in Utah through the summer, but we do get some, and it helps a lot. Rain sensors are a great idea. They will shut your system off, and there's different types and different models and brands. There's some that are wireless. They're fairly easy to hook up. But the benefit of those, obviously, is that it will shut it off for the next run cycle until it dries out enough to where it will start up again. Typically here it's usually about 2 days in the summertime before it's dry enough where it's going to start watering again. It's not always necessary on smaller systems. I just go shut my controller off, but it's nice to have if you're not home or you're going to be away on vacation, to know that that system's not going to be running when it's raining. The other type of controllers that are becoming widely used are the Wi-Fi smart controllers. And what a smart controller is a controller that gathers weather information, and there's various sources, but there's weather stations all over the country, and there's locally, you have access to them as well. And so the company that makes the smart controller ties into that weather station, monitors rainfall, wind, temperature, humidity, and it calculates, based upon that information, how much it can reduce the watering time. So you set it for 20 minutes, and then the weather station says, hey, I got 1/10 of an inch of rain, so I don't need to water a full schedule. I'll reduce it by 30%, and then you'll still have enough water to maintain a good landscape. And a lot of those now come in the Wi-Fi capabilities, where you can connect through your own internet to your phone, and if you're away or if you want somebody else to turn it off, you can do it through your phone. And you can see when it's watering and how much it's watering. Engage in proper maintenance practices. One thing that leads to a lot of overwater usage and overwatering is over-pressurized systems. If you see a spray head and it's misting and it's coming up over your head, that water is not getting applied to the surface, it's evaporating. And when you see that, it's typically because the system's running at too much pressure. And they make heads that have built-in pressure regulators so that it's set to the proper pressure for that nozzle. And when they do their tests for the nozzles, they'll put cups out over the whole landscape, water, and then check and see, am I watering evenly across the whole landscape? Or is one area too heavy and one area is not enough? And that will tell you, it can tell you pressure issues, it can tell you head spacing, it can give you the information that you need. Now, obviously, we can't all, we're all not going to go out and set cups all over our lawn, although you could. There are companies that do audits that way. But for your own specific yards, every year you have one side of your grass that's dry. And it doesn't matter, you bump your system up, and it just doesn't quite come back the way that it should. And now you're overwatering the area that was okay before. So you can make adjustments in the zone itself based on nozzles and head spacing so that you're not having to just continually bump it up to get those brown spots green. I highly recommend, though, that we all spend the extra time that's needed to go through our systems, or have somebody go through your system and dial it in. Our population's only continuing to grow, and our water availability is continuing to decrease. So it's on all of us to do our part and try and make our systems as most efficient as possible, and yet still have them looking as good as possible as well. Thanks. And now I'll hand it over to Brian, our arborist.
Hi. So my name is Brian Osler, one of the certified arborists at BrightView, and so I'll just be talking a little bit about tree care in general, and I'll try to really apply this to homeowners since that's kind of the topic. So the first one is fertilizing, and late fall and early spring. A big thing on fertilizing I thought I'd just touch base on is kind of the reasoning behind it. If we do a soil test, in general, a lot of the nutrients that we're looking for are there. The challenge is the pH level of the soil is just too high, and so it becomes non-water soluble. So trees absorb water, and nutrients are water soluble, so therefore they get absorbed along with it. So that's the challenge, and so it's really hard to offset the pH, and so these nutrients are they're not able to be absorbed. And so we want to fertilize. Late fall and early spring is a good time. Late fall is great just because during the winter, a lot of things happen in the root zone that we're just not paying attention to. A lot of times, especially as homeowners, we're looking up and not necessarily thinking down. And so putting the nutrients in the ground, the roots are still very active throughout the entire winter. And so they're storing and absorbing a lot of the nutrients for spring. And so it's just a great time in general. And then spring, obviously, especially if you didn't get the late fall, is great just because a lot of moisture is moving, transpiration, which is basically the flow of water from the bottom to the top. So in general, a tree is a vacuum. It's sucking up water from the ground, and then it transpires by releasing it through the leaves. Underneath the leaves is stomatas, and the stomatas open and kind of sort of sweat. And so this vacuum is happening. So in general, just a great time while a lot of the water is transpiring through the springtime. Mulchings. Mulchings are great, especially if your guys' trees are in grass area. There's a lot of root competition that's going on. I love what Galen said, low and slow, like let the water really make it down below especially if you're in grass areas. Just because grass roots, are within that top 12 inches for the majority of the time, and our tree roots are usually between ground level and 18 inches. General rule of thumb. A lot of people think, oh, there's tap roots, this, that, and the other, but the majority of roots do not get below 20 inches. Few reasons why. The nutrients in general come from debris breakdown from the top, or we fertilize from the top. And so for the nutrients to actually absorb and get further down, it's just unlikely. So the roots themselves are right across the top. And so there's a lot of root competition going on. So in general, a tree ring, you'd want to just cut out the grass, depending on the space. The more the merrier, definitely. But even a 2 or 3 foot tree ring would make a tremendous difference for your guys' tree health, just because you'd be eliminating the competition of nutrients and water sources. The grass is quick to grab it all. And then also keeping in the mulch rings, keeping mulch, just because it's constantly, as water gets sprayed onto it, the mulch itself is actually breaking down and dropping nutrients down into the soil. And then on top of that, it also helps cool the area, depending, especially like if there's asphalt or concrete or windows. These things, windows due to reflection, but these things in general are heating the top surface layers. And so a nice mulch ring will help absorb moisture, keep moisture throughout the day, and just in general help to have a better success with your guys' trees. Proper pruning. It's a tough one in a quick sense, but I think proper pruning, we do need to keep elevation. I'm big on keeping structural clearance. A lot of people want to keep things natural, which is great. I just think we want to keep at least maybe 6 inches to 2 feet of clearance from homes, walls, structures. And then beyond that, if you're looking at your trees at home, really just looking for crowded areas. If you're looking for where branches are layering on top of one another, we want to eliminate some of those so that there's a little bit more space in between them, so that the tree can sway a little bit nicer. It just in general will be a healthier tree. You'll have less rubbing. Pulling out the cross branches. If you guys are out pruning in your own, and this goes, I suppose, to a degree for shrubs and some of the ornamentals down below. But in trees, pulling out the branches that are crossing, or maybe growing from one side across to the other side, just because in time, as those develop into the outer crown on this side, but they come from over here, when the wind comes, that's a lot of flex on that tree, just because it's inappropriate branch structure. And so you guys want to kind of look for those, especially in our younger trees, to pull those out. In the larger trees, a little bit tougher, just because we create huge holes. But as your guys' trees are younger in our neighborhoods or in our residential homes, it'd be good to look for those and try to pull them out. If a branch is coming from the right side, it should be filling into the crown of the right side, and so on and so forth. So kind of look for those cross branches and pull some of those out if you can. But be mindful not to pull out too many, because you'll create huge holes. So if you would like, I'm more than happy to come over and chat with you guys at your guys' own homes and kind of talk a little bit more about that. Water requirements. Something I highly recommend for homeowners is you can get them at Home Depot or any single nursery, is just a water gauge. It's a little box in a sense, and then it has, I think you can get them anywhere from like 12 to 18 inches. You can get big ones, but for you guys, I think 12 to 18 inches would be great. And it's just a metal rod. And it's a water gauge, or a moisture gauge is what it is, a moisture meter, and you guys can check your moisture. So trees in general shouldn't just be wet all the time. Well, plants in general, but since we're talking about trees in general shouldn't just be wet all the time. They should go through a watering cycle, in the sense that it should more or less dry out, and then we want to water it again and get it nice and moist. The reason is because too much watering will necessarily drown the tree. So a good moisture meter is a good way to test it. It's super easy. All you do is stick it in, and the little pin moves, and you'll see where the moisture's at. A lot of the times we're thinking, what's wrong with my tree? A lot of the times it's water. We're just over-watering. The soil themselves is really compacted out here in general, And so we dig a hole just big enough and we pop that tree in, and then that becomes a bucket for water. And so when we're watering, it just sits in these holes, and we're not thinking about that. So in general, a moisture meter is probably under 20 bucks, and it would be the best thing you guys invested into for your guys' trees, just to be able to check it and know, okay, I got plenty of moisture. You can pull it out, give it a week, and you can test it again. Okay, it's a little dry, and you guys can kind of monitor it that way, especially if you're doing some hand watering on some of them. So, but again, just kind of allowing that cycle of drying out and being moist is a great way for homeowners to really keep up on the health of the tree. It'll keep down on some of the diseases that could happen just due to overwatering or underwatering. So winter water, I think in general winter watering is really important. But again, that moisture meter is going to help you guys because the water is not going to dissipate very quickly. And so being able to know what's going on 10, 12 inches under the ground would be huge for you guys. So, and again, the low and slow is big, but you'd probably spread it out. Instead of doing it once or twice a week, you guys would be doing it once or twice a month. Just because that water will sit there for a long period of time and give plenty of water. And for some of you guys, depending on your guys' yards and kind of what's going on throughout the landscaping portion, it may vary, but again, that water, I think it's a water meter, right? Moisture meter. So it'll be huge for you guys. Tree staking. I think a big thing that I'm seeing a lot of times is we think that the stake that comes with it at the nursery is the stake that's going to hold that tree up, and that is not the case. That tree is to make that tree grow straight in the nursery only. So when you guys bring those trees home and plant them in your yards, you see them at Walmart, they got cute little fruit trees, and there's that little tiny stake or bamboo stick growing right next to it. That should come off. So, and then do either a 2 or 3 wood stake system would be great, just to kind of keep it probably for the first 2 or 3 years. Kind of think of it as probably until you have maybe a 2-inch caliper, and then you can probably start removing them on some of the trees unless it has a big crown and maybe a little bit longer, just so that it can sustain itself in the wind pressure. And then they should really come off, and the tree should be able to support itself. But all the smaller ones should hold probably for the first 2 or 3 years to have a staking system. So and they I think the posts are $5 a piece, and little rubber grommets that kind of tie to it are a couple dollars a piece. So, but you want to take those wood stakes off. They'll damage, they'll scar the trunk. So in general, you want to take those off. I think till Q&A, that's about my portion. So. And then Lynn is over the landscape enhancement section.
Hi, I'm Lynn Yoder, and I'm an enhancement manager with BrightView. So my portion of the whole scheme is Doug takes care of the account as far as all the maintenance. Galen takes care of the water, Ryan takes care of the tree pruning, and I take care of mainly adding new plants to your landscape, and then also taking care of the plants you have. So a couple of topics we want to talk about today is maximizing flowering shrubs. So different kinds of shrubs tend to flower longer than others. Most of the landscapes are already set up when we get to them through the developer. But you can go back in and add shrubs that will flower at different times of the year. Basically, there are shrubs that flower pretty much every time of the year. But the one shrub doesn't do it all. One shrub doesn't flower continuously spring, summer, and fall. There are different plants that flower in the spring, different in the summer, different in the fall. With the exception of a few, like shrub roses tend to kind of flower all 3 seasons. So you can always do those. And then to add more for the fertilizer, when you're fertilizing grass or vegetables or perennials, you want a high nitrogen content, which is the first number of the fertilizer. When you're doing trees and shrubs, it works a lot better if you go easy on the nitrogen. The other 2 are phosphorus and potash. And a good even fertilizer works best, like 12-12-12. Usually you can find it, somewhere between 10-10-10 and 15-15-15 with nitrogen. That works best for your woody plants. So that would be all your shrubs and trees. and that will help with the fertilizing. And then I agree with Galen and Brian on the drying cycle of irrigation is one of the more important cycles in plant health, because if the ground is always wet, there's little small white fibrous roots, and they need oxygen. So if the ground is always wet, they will die, and then that diminishes the plant's ability to pull the nutrients that are in the soil into the plant. So what that typically looks like in your landscape is, in the summer when it's hot, if the grass is a little brown between waterings, you know, I'm not talking about dead, I'm just talking about a little brown, it's actually better for the health of the shrubs and the trees, as long as they're getting enough water, as opposed to being, Galen was talking about this earlier, when you walk on the lawn, if it is squishy and soft, that is not good for your plants.
Can you repeat the fertilizer part? You went really fast on that. The 12, 12, 12, and whatever.
With nitrogen,
Just that section.
She wants you to go over the fertilizer. What recommended fertilizers do we recommend?
You said something about woody plants and.
okay, so for grass, the first number is nitrogen. There's 3 numbers on fertilizer: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash. When you are fertilizing your grass, your perennials, your garden, any herbaceous plant, which is a plant without a woody stem, they like high nitrogen, which is the first number. So a lot of grass fertilizer could be 25-5-5 or 25-5-0. And then for your trees and shrubs, it would be a lot better if the first number is low, because you don't want to push the green growth. That's when you want like 10-10-10, 12-12-12, 15-15-15, something like that with nitrogen, and your trees and shrubs will do a lot better that way. And then, so a lot of you are probably going to be thinking about going to local nurseries and buying plants to enhance your yards. One of the things I would really recommend is looking around your neighborhood and see what's doing well. And if you don't know the name of the plant, it's no problem. Take a picture of it. When you go to the nursery, you can get more plants the same. So I think as you go through your neighborhoods in the summer, you'll see some plants really aren't doing much, and some plants are thriving. And our environment's different. The books you get online will say that our zone is about a zone 5, maybe some zone 6 plants will grow here. That's kind of a nationwide cold hardiness, but a lot of zone 5 and zone 6 plants do not do well here because of the elevation, the low the low humidity rate in the summer, and because of our elevation in desert, we have a high swing from day to night, and some plants don't tolerate that as well. A lot of maples, a lot of oaks, they just don't tolerate that. But if you look at the plants doing well in the neighborhood, and of course, if you want advice on this, we're always around. I think a lot of you are customers. But, okay, well, I'll turn it over to Q&A from there.
All right, we can start the questions and that's right, my face. Go ahead.
We're in the Garden Park 55 community where
We know the property.
BrightView landscaping does it all.
Yes.
Do all of these things for us that you just talked about.
So we do your grass fertilization, your shrub fertilization, 2 tree fertilizations a year, and the shrubs are 2 times as well. And then we mow, trim your shrubs, and all of the irrigation checks that Galen talked about, we do all of those. But I will tell you right now that the trees could use a little bit of more fertilizer than what's in our contract. So if you want to add fertilizer, you can talk to one of us. We'll recommend some fertilizers that we would supplement on those trees above what we do.
Do you irrigate?
Yeah, every year.
Okay. And you regulate the water as you talked about, slow to progressive during the
Yeah, so right now the systems they're setting those, and they are setting them for I think 3 days a week. And they water, it'll stay that for as long as we can keep it, and then we adjust as the temperatures go up, we adjust per individual zone and home.
We got a water bill that said we were using 3 times the water of our neighbors. So I was wondering,
If
you just took it over this year, but you do regulate those so that won't happen?
Yeah, and I don't, like I said, with your individual yards, I don't know if your yard has different needs, like you might have more sod versus what your neighbor has. And turf does take the most in the landscape, so if you have more turf than your neighbor, you're gonna water more. And the average zone for landscape irrigation runs about 15 gallons a minute. So for every minute you water, and most homes water 3 to 4 zones, you're gonna water about an hour, and you put out 15 gallons a minute for that hour.
And do you make repairs if you see something?
Yes.
Okay, and last, do you prune our trees and bushes?
We do the bushes twice a year as needed. They prefer a natural look in garden parks, so those are trimmed to a natural look versus a hedge. The trees we prune up to 12 feet, and then above that becomes a different issue that the HOA takes on. Go ahead.
You mentioned the mulch rings around the trees. How big do you make those usually?
Yeah, really, that's a tough question in the sense of, you know, if it's right in the middle of the lawn. I mean, it'd be nice to have the tree ring right underneath the entire canopy. That'd be great, because the rule of thumb is your root system's gonna be approximately the outer portion of your canopy. It's gonna be everything within. However, that's obviously not really feasible in most yards. So, I mean, a nice 2 or 3 foot ring. Now, when I say that, it's from tree out, so it's actually, say, 4 to 6 feet. That'd be a minimum at best. So it's kind of a general rule of thumb as to what you can or can't do. And then the bigger the tree, usually we want to have a larger ring. So, but again, it really applies in a homeowner's stance to the individual yard, just because for aesthetics purposes, it makes sense.
I just have a comment about the aeration. We had a really healthy lawn. We moved in 2009. Everything was wonderful with our lawn. Brian's doing a good job of taking care of it until 2013. We had some people come in 2013, aerate the lawn, and I've had chronic ring ever since. I've really been fighting with it.
Okay, so necrotic ring spot is the most common fungus in the Wasatch area. The University of Utah, as well as the Utah State College up in Logan, the ag school here in town, they've done studies across the Wasatch Front and found in the 500 yards they tested, 500 yards had necrotic ring spot fungus inside the yard. It's really common for that to be transported from an aeration, or if you have a lawn mowing company, they can move that fungus into your lawn from somebody else's yard. There are options to treat that. There's a company that is called Green to Green. They're the only ones I know that have a product that will treat the necrotic ring spot and get rid of it. Altogether, it goes from a dead spot that you probably have now to it's a green, healthy turf. The other option, ryegrass, is blended in with the turf that you already have, but ryegrass is more tolerant than fescue and bluegrass that is the dominant grasses in the blend weed that is used through most of the area. So if you are having a really bad problem, I would recommend talking to Biograss. They sell both a ryegrass sod and straight ryegrass seed. Once you put that down, it does require a little bit more water in the summertime, but ryegrass will not get necrotic ring spot.
Okay. What's the name of that company that gets rid of it?
It's Ring to Green.
Ring to Green?
Yep.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
And just a general state or practice with newer trees, young trees, as far as fertilizing.
So on your young trees, your root ball is only In a 2-inch caliber tree, you have about a 24-inch root ball. With fertilizer, you want it to be close to that root ball. As the tree matures, you basically follow the canopy of the tree with your fertilizer. So if the canopy is 8 feet from the trunk, you're going to fertilize 8 feet from the trunk, because you want that fertilizer to encourage root growth away from the tree.
So
If
we're
you,
doing okay, sorry, doing okay fertilizing right off the bat.
yeah, right away. When most of these trees are planted, the company that does a lot of the park strip trees for Daybreak, they put in some fertilizer with mycorrhiza, which helps stimulate that initial root growth. But within 3 months, that fertilizer's gone. So adding some fertilizer to your trees right away is fine.
Yeah, and with it being gone, a lot of that's because the soil is actually buffering the pH of the area, and so it's no longer available. And so that's why we want to continue to apply. Just to think you're going to apply and that's going to be available for a long time is not reality, because the soil will buffer itself back the pH too high, and so those nutrients are no longer available, and that's the challenge we face.
Okay, so every 3 months?
Yeah, 2 or 3 times a year is going to be probably optimal, depending on your species, but more or less. And some of the faster growing trees, highly recommend probably not over fertilizing, just because we're just going to push way too much growth. And long term, you're just going to have a tree that's going to split and break apart. So practicing on the faster growing trees, if you go to the nursery and like, I want a super fast growing tree, once a year is probably more than enough. So, but some of your hardwoods or slow growing trees, 2 or 3 times a year is yeah, fruit trees definitely 2 or 3 times a year is definitely applicable.
Well, I know in my backyard's on a pretty good slope, and my neighbor behind me is much higher, so I'm getting a lot of water from their runoff, just on the higher part of my area where I've got trees, so I'm just worried about too much water there.
Yeah, and with that moisture meter will help you gauge how much you need water, because he may be helping you out.
Well, you definitely do that.
Yeah.
I think it's too much.
Yeah. And I think going back to the tree ring as well, question, these are good practices, and so just as much as we can. I think I left that kind of on a, not necessarily a negative note, but not a positive note, is just something is more than nothing, and as best as we can apply that.
Does it make a difference, liquid fertilizer, solid granules, or those spike things you drive in?
So again, that's going to depend on the type of tree you have. For your evergreens, a spike works really well. You could get it where it's needed. Evergreens, they do have their roots that spread out, but getting it close to the tree ring. IFA has some really good fertilizer stakes. They come with a plastic cap. You can even pound them into Daybreak soil. We've actually used those for trees in Daybreak, and they do a really good job. The liquid fertilizer, normally you're going to want to put that down. The reason most people don't use liquid for trees and shrubs is they're in grass, and the grass is going to take that because the liquid doesn't penetrate as far. So you want to get something down in the stakes work in turf, because you can pound them through the grass and down in past their root zone.
Doug, is it a good idea to use a pitchfork and go into the ground with it to get sort of aerating around the trees?
Yes, anything you can do to help get oxygen to those trees, especially with the soil we have out here. Once that soil recompacts, it is hard pan. There's a lot of clay, so if you can break up the soil and get some air to those roots, it's going to help your trees. Go ahead.
I was reading through the pamphlet, and it was talking about using a sharp blade for mowing. Where can you go, or how would you get your blade sharpened?
So I do my own, and I'm sure these guys probably all do the same thing, take them off and use a grinder. I would not recommend that for a general homeowner, because you're going to be sharpening your blade maybe 2 or 3 times a year. All of you'll see like the mower shops, there's kind of spread throughout the area. You can look up mower mechanic. All of those shops will sharpen blades. I'd recommend, if you're going to use them, to buy a second blade, and then you take one off, take it down, have it sharpened, but you still have a sharp blade for your mower, so you just change them out at that time.
Is that difficult?
No, they're on most mowers on the bottom. Even if you have a double bladed mower, it's just one bolt that holds the mower blade on. You'll wanna pay attention, a lot of them are reverse threaded. So instead of righty-tighty, it's righty, turns to the right to loosen the blade. A lot of people end up taking their mower to the mechanic because they can't get the blade off because they're tightening it instead of loosening it. Go ahead.
Do we need to rake up when you aerate the lawn? I noticed my grass has so many.
No, it actually, when we do that, we punch through a layer of what they call thatch. And thatch is like right on the edge of where the root crown and the blade meet. That is a healthy bioorganics. So as it breaks down, it just puts the nutrients back instead of removing nutrients from your grass. If you leave them there, they'll break down and you'll have those nutrients stay in the lawn. Because the big thing out here, there is no organics in your soil. So the faster you can get organics into the soil, the healthier your lawn is going to be.
Okay. Last year I noticed that some of my water heads was not working. Do I have to?
Are you in
Garden Park?
Well,
Yes.
if you call your HOA office, they will send us out to take a look at them and get those taken care of.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I've noticed I think they're called suckers right next to my trees. Is that, if I cut them down, is that gonna hurt the tree?
No, you want to cut those off. Those are actually
Right,
detrimental
yeah.
to the tree.
So
Cut them as
push 'em
close to the
around.
ground as you can.
Okay.
Be careful not to put any spray on the suckers if you are spraying Roundup or anything, because they are attached to the tree. But just what Doug said, if you cut them off, it's way better.
And so, I just want to clarify, thatching, is that what you were saying, not good?
So there's a big misconception with power raking removing the thatch layer. So most of the time a power rake, they don't remove a thatch layer. The thatch layer is actually a healthy portion right at the root zone where the crown and the soil kind of all meet. That's a healthy portion. The dead grass that is kind of left, if you look at your lawn, normally early in the spring you'll see maybe it looks like there's dead grass left on the lawn. You want to rake that out. You can use a power rake or there's rakes just for that. And you want to get that dead grass out, but the thatch layer itself you don't want to remove.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We were in Sugar House and we had a tree and my husband would trim around the tree, the grass. We moved over here and our tree does not have the circle around it. And at Sugar House, we damaged our tree by trimming around it. Is there any way that we can get you guys to come and put the circles around our two trees?
Where are you?
North Shore.
Do you live in the North Shore townhomes?
No.
Just in a
regular
home? Yeah, if you want to talk to us after, we can get your address. We would charge for that because we have to send it out, but yeah, I can send out a guy to take care of your tree rings.
Okay.
And that's a good point, as you guys are mowing, making sure that you're not weed whipping the base of your guys' trees. It's definitely damaging the inside, and all in all it's gonna, because just right inside the bark layer is where your phloem and xylem is, and it's whipping, and it's basically beating that layer, and it's just literally less than it's right underneath the bark. So a lot of our trees that are pretty thin bark, you're beating that xylem, that phloem, and all in all, it's going to cut off the flow from the roots up the canyon or up to the tree.
I have a little Japanese lace-leaf maple, and fairly new, was just planted last year. Should I be watering that extra every week or so, and also to prune it? Should that be done in the spring or in the fall?
Yeah, so, what's the exposure on the Japanese, lace leaf maple?
I actually have one on every side of my house.
Okay, so they'll do a little better on the north and east exposure.
Does better on the north and east?
Yeah, sometimes they have a little trouble with the summer heat on the south and west exposure. You can prune them any time of the year is okay. In the summertime, when there's leaves on the tree, they actually they repair themselves quicker. But you can prune 12 months out of the year. And yes, if it's brand new, I think it would be good to water, especially in the winter, because the irrigation is off. Most of the places out here are on separate irrigation water. That irrigation water only runs from the middle of April to the middle of October. And there's a long stretch in there with no water. And the new plants could use an extra drink. Not very often, that time of year, maybe once every 2 weeks. And if you have a brand new plant in your yard, in addition to the irrigation, it'd be really good if you watered it by hose once a week to get it on the root zone. Because what these guys are talking about is all the plants that are established and growing. When you put in a new plant, there's no roots. The roots are, this far from the plant. And so they dry out really quickly. That plant will suck up that moisture from that small area and then transpire it. Just like we perspire, the plant will just transpire into the atmosphere, so they will dry out very quickly, the brand new plants you're talking about. In about 2 or 3 years, it should be rooted in.
But now do it at least once a week?
Yes. Yes.
Only as needed. If it looks funny, don't.
Yes, that's a good point. As Doug was saying, using the moisture meter that they're talking about would be best because you don't want to overwater. Overwatering is really bad for the tree.
Well, I'm in Garden Park as well. Would it be possible to bring the drip system kind of over toward those trees?
You could.
Look at it.
Yeah. Are the trees in the turf or are they in the planter?
Are they
In the grass or in the planter? They're in the planter. Yeah, we can adjust, and it should be, normally when we plant plants, we want to change the irrigation. Most of the homes in Daybreak have been installed with a point source irrigation for the planters. So if you look at your irrigation, you might not see, there's no sprinkler heads, there's nothing that waters above ground. The plants that you have existing are watered with a drip that goes directly to that plant. So if you add anything to your landscaping, you definitely need to look at the irrigation and make the changes necessary when you plant that to get that plant the proper water, because I've seen a lot of plants that were planted properly, they look like healthy plants, but then the irrigation system was never modified, they dried out and they died.
What's the best number to call you, gentlemen?
If you'll just come see me after, I'll get your address and we can set up a time for an irrigation guy to come look at your tree and get some water to it.
Thank you.
On that one, it goes directly to the homeowner.
Do you guys do repair sprinklers, or do you recommend a company that does?
We do. We're primarily commercial, but we do residential as well. Same thing, you can come up afterwards, I'll give you my card and we'll come look at it and let you know a bit on what you're wanting to accomplish. Go ahead.
Do you weed in Garden Park in shrub and flowering plant areas?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, they have a schedule, there's a map, a schedule with the weeding schedule for Garden Park. And you'll see the guys coming around, walking through, pulling weeds, doing your hard edge on your beds if needed. They'll also, in a month or so, they'll start doing some trimming.
Do you recommend leaving, it says in here about leaving the grass clippings, do you recommend doing that every time you mow? Can you leave the grass clippings? I have a push mower, so can I just let them?
I mulch every time I mow, and then I rotate the aeration with dethatching or power rake. So 1 year I'll aerate, and the next year I use a power rake and get the dead grass out. Once you'll see it. The other option, if you have it, you can top dress that dead grass, the decomposing grass. If you top dress that with an organic mulch or a sand, it turns into organic matter in the soil and helps improve your lawn. Right here in the blue shirt.
I had a couple questions about watering. You seem to say that there's kind of different requirements for grass or for the trees. Well, my trees just in my lawn, there's it's not different mechanism for getting water on it, it just gets whatever the lawn gets.
So normally in irrigated turf, a tree gets enough water. The one time that they don't inside turf is during the like late fall and through the winter. Since the grass doesn't need water, it's gone dormant, they're not really active. If you do have a tree in turf, I would recommend watering it through the winter. And then if it's in a planter, it's watered with your other hardwood shrubs and whatnot. But in turf, they do normally get enough water. But that's why I'll let Brian explain why you want to look at the water for those.
Yeah, I think in addition, maybe if it's your own personal home trees, is adding, you know, just a drip or say a hose with maybe just a slow flow to try and drive those roots down, because the problem with it being in the turf is the roots are right up on top, and you start to feel them as you're walking around. We'd like to have some water that goes deeper so that we drive those roots further down. I think it's a challenge, but it would be nice if we could do that.
The other thing was, you're talking about 7 or 8 minutes with the, but there's different kinds of sprinklers. I think the ones that go all the time
Yes. So that's for a spray head, a spray nozzle. It's not the finger rotation like you might be talking about MP rotators.
Right. It takes a lot longer.
It does take a lot longer, and each of those has a specific precipitation rate, and you can get that from the manufacturer. You can go onto any of their websites, and they'll tell you exactly what precipitation rate, how many inches per hour that type of nozzle puts down, and you can use that to determine how long you need to water to replace. And like I said, it's typically, you know, 1/4 of an inch. It may go as high as 1/3 of an inch when we're at peak. But if you're safe in the 1/4 inch per day and determine how many minutes you want, and then split that in half, like I said, for a good cycle and soak pattern. Yes, in the room.
Good source for compost is the pH down in this area.
So
typically one that delivers.
Glover's Nursery, they'll deliver compost. Most of your landscape supply warehouses that have them, Swanson's Gravel Yard has compost. The best price is actually the dump. They have some really good compost, but you have to pick it up. But it is a really good product for their cost.
It was free the other day.
Yeah, they do programs. The city does programs like that where they give it away. I think normally it's about $22 a ton. It's not really that, like you take a pickup load out there, it doesn't cost a lot to get your pickup.
Second question, you mentioned watering at night. I've always been told that's bad. Is that acceptable here because of the low humidity?
So the reason people say don't water at night a lot of times is because they're afraid of diseases. So people from back east where they have a lot more of that issue, it is better to water during the day. Here in Utah where we're dry, daybreak, the wind blows all the time, funguses are not very common. We get some snow mold every once in a while and a few other funguses. But for the majority of the time, since it is a desert, a nighttime watering is best because you don't lose as much water to evaporation before it even makes it to the root zone.
It kind of conflicts with what's written here, so.
Yeah, that is a flyer we looked up and it was the closest information I could get on a lot of the stuff. It did have the irrigation on the wrong time, but all the other information is pertinent to this area.
The compost is $15 a yard at the transport and landfill, and that fills up kind of like a smaller pickup. My kids do a mulch service that will start in about a week or so. So if you're on Daybreak residence or a community garden or things like that, you'll see. I'll start putting it out there. If you need mulch, let us know.
What site is that?
It's the it's got some bark in it, but
No,
it's
what website?
Oh, no, I'll just put it, it's not a website, it's just something my kids do to make some money, through the year. I'll just put it out there, so if somebody needs a mulch delivered, we just, I'm like, you guys need money, you're gonna work for it, you gotta pick up.
Otherwise, they'll come and actually just, if you get your own mulch, they'll come and spread it.
Yeah, so if you go get your own mulch at the Trans Jordan landfill, they'll just scoop it and put it in your truck, and you
Yeah.
just tarp it down. So, and it's $15 a yard.
Is
They
that,
also
is
have-
that black stuff, or is it?
It's really nice and black. They've had a lot of scientists go through it, and it keeps getting better every year. We've used it for probably 10 years now, and things grow great, especially with our terrible soil here. It's really good stuff. Jenny, who's the master gardener here for Daybreak, she uses it and she recommends it.
Okay.
They also have premium bark chips if you want the just bark, and that's $30 a yard.
We just always use the brown and stuff like that.
They got mulch and compost?
It's like a compost mulch. I don't know.
I agree with you that the compost at Trans Jordan is good. I would try to stay away from the bark,
Yeah.
whether you go to Glover or whether you go to Trans Jordan, because the bark is the cork substance of the tree. The compost you're talking about is the whole tree ground up and then composted, and it enriches the soil faster.
Right.
And I would try to, you can use fine or medium.
That sounds more like a mulch, not a compost.
Well, they
It is
have
a
a,
mulch.
it's more of a mulch, but it's,
It is
fine.
composted, but you're right. It's
I'm
a-
looking for compost in the
it's-
lawn.
No, this stuff you can spread in the lawn.
Okay.
It's a real fine mulch, they grind it fine and then it rots.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's pretty stuff, and it doesn't stink.
And they screen it, so it's probably 3/8 minus, it's pretty small.
With the mulch, do you recommend like cleaning up your grass mulch, getting rid of that and putting new mulch down, or just put it on top?
I recommend putting it right on top because as that mulch decomposes, it adds organic matter right into your soil, so it improves your soil as it rots.
I have a bunch of places that has way too much mulch already built up, so what do you expect, what do you mulch do with it?
You can rake it to the areas that are thin or move it with a pitchfork. Normally, once you have mulch for about a year, it starts to rot and you'll see like a white, almost mold-looking substance throughout it. So it's not as attractive to move that.
Is the mulch dangerous, or?
No. And let me clarify. If you have an allergy to that, yes, you could have an allergic reaction, but to most people, you're not gonna have any problem because that isn't be an allergy.
But it's not dangerous to the lawn?
No.
Mulch, compost, what is the difference, and do you come to Garden Park and replenish each year, whether it's blown off or moved around?
So the compost we're talking about is a really fine product that it's about a 3/8 inch minus. It looks like almost like dirt, but it's organic matter, and that is recommended. You spread that in your yard. You can spread it in other places, but in your yard it adds organics to the soil and helps improve your soil for both fertilizer uptake, plant health, your water usage. Everything kind of is improved by adding that organic matter to the soil. To answer your question with the bark replacement in Garden Park, that's done on a budgetary basis, and they tell us where that goes.
Any experience with the dirt bags?
They're good guys. They're right out here in West Jordan. They'll drop off. They use a super sack, so it's about the size of that thing weighed down. It's a little bit.
It's more soil than compost. It's good soil.
Not as good as compost.
It's good.
It's good with, that's the key thing.
Yeah, they do. They'll drop it right in front of your house.
It's a good product.
Cool.
I think
Any last questions?